Okay, I've gotten a lot of questions on gouache, so we're going to do a very simple exercise today that I think is key when you first get your gouache, and that's to do some swatches. And I'm going to show you how to do it to learn your paint and start to get better results with whatever you're painting, florals, landscapes, whatever you want to do with gouache. So today we're going to be using Winsor & Newton Designer Gouache. This is Naples Yellow Deep, and then we're using some Himi Jelly Cup Gouache. Grab just a basic brush. You can use some mixed media paper. You can use a sketchbook like I'm doing. And yeah, let's grab your gouache and let's go. I've got my plate here. I'm going to be putting my gouache on. I'm using water-based gouache, not acrylic. I've got a couple cups of water here for gouache. You do need to wash your brush more. I've got a inexpensive brush here. This was a set I got off Amazon. It's for watercolor, acrylic, gouache, many different things. I don't use my nice watercolor brushes for gouache because the paint builds up in the bristles a lot more, and you have to really mash it into the water to get the bristles clean, and so you don't want to be using a really high quality brush with your gouache. I mean, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. For the paper today, I'm just using a sketchbook that I have that I've done some other gouache paintings in. We're going to go ahead and get our paint all ready to go. So I'm going to get some gouache on the plate here. I've got, again, Winsor & Newton Designer Gouache. This is Naples Yellow Deep. I'm going to put a little blob of that there. And then I'm going to scoop out. This is another reason you don't want to use your nice watercolor brushes, because if you're scooping into these jelly cups, it's just kind of hard on the bristles. So we've got our two yellows there. I'm going to get my paper all ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to start by doing some swatches. So I have that same brush that I was using. I have rinsed it out completely, and I have dried it on my little towel cloth here. It looks disgusting. Don't worry, it's fine. So right now I don't have any really excess water on my brush. I have dried it off as completely as I can. It's still just a little bit damp, but there's no excess water. There's no drips or anything like that. So that's the first swatch that I'm going to do. There's no water or anything on my plate. So I'm getting a pretty concentrated form of gouache. This is the designer gouache that I'm going to swatch first. So I'm going to go ahead and do a swatch of this. So you can see you get a nice layer of opacity. One thing I do want you to notice, this is too thick for what I would normally use, and you'll know that because you go into your gouache and then you go to layer it on and you get this dry brush stroke. That is not what you want with gouache. So you start to feel like a pull on the paper where it's getting dry, and the more you work with gouache, the more you'll start to feel like, okay, this feels dry, and eventually you'll be able to feel it on your plate as well. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to just touch the tip of the brush very lightly into water. I'm going to load up my brush a little bit more. I'm going to get just a little bit more water, just a little touch, and I'm going to add it into the gouache here. So it's going to start to get a little bit creamier. Okay, I'm going to take that. I'm going to do my next swatch. So you can already see how much easier the brush glides on the page and how nice the coverage is. So you're still getting a nice consistency on it. You're still getting nice opacity, but it's much easier to blend. So I'm going to take a little bit more water. I'm going to touch it in there, and I'm going to do my next swatch. Okay, so again, still super nice and creamy. Okay, touch in a little bit more water. You can start to see, hopefully, that it's getting a little bit more transparent. Adding a little bit more water. Again, even more so. So some colors, you'll do this 6, 7, 8 times, perhaps, depending on how much water you're adding. And then I'm going to do my last swatch here, rinse most of that out of my brush. So I'm not even touching into paint at this point. I'm just adding more water onto my brush. So you can see it's very, very translucent there. So the key thing to remember with the designer gouache is you're going to start out more opaque, and you have a little bit more play time before you start to get more translucent. For the less expensive gouaches, again, this is the Himi gouache. I've got a pretty dry brush here. Same thing, I'm dabbing it off first. And then I'm going to add it into this gouache. This is going to be the first swatch that I do. You have less playtime before it starts to get more transparent with the less expensive gouaches. So I'm going to do my first swatch here. So again, we've got a nice consistency. I don't feel that pull of the brush, so I'm going to keep going with it. I'm adding just a touch of water. Okay, I'm going to add that in here, reload my brush a little bit. And then I'm going to start doing my second one. Okay, so I still have pretty nice coverage there. And I'm not re-dipping into the paint. I'm just going into the water here. Okay, but you can start to see where some of that translucency comes in much faster with the less expensive gouaches. They're still totally workable, but the water control is very different, and that's what you need to keep in mind. I'm going to switch that off. Okay, and I'm going to do my last one here. Okay, perfect. That looks great. Okay, hopefully doing this exercise was helpful in figuring out the opacity and the transparency of your gouache. Again, the more you do it, the more you'll start to feel that kind of pull that I was talking about, whether it's on your paper or your plate, and you'll be able to adjust your water control based on that. The biggest thing to keep in mind with gouache is you're not adding a lot of water to it. Like watercolor, you're taking a little bit of pigment and a lot of water. Gouache, you're taking a lot of pigment and a little bit of water. So just touching in just a drop of water here and there, if you have trouble with it, just get your brush completely dry, and then you can take like a little dropper and just add it in that way if you want to be a little bit more careful with it. Last thing is storing gouache. So if I have my water-based gouache, I'll usually put it onto a plate to do my mixing or portioning or things like that, especially with the tubes. And then I just put this, spray it with a little bit of water before I put it away, and then I'll put it into a Ziploc bag, and it's ready to go when I'm wanting to use it. I hope these tips were helpful. If you have any other questions, drop them down below. I just realized there's a lot of chaos happening behind me, but I have an 11-month-old, and this is real life. So hope to see you next time.